Welcome back to Discovering Nutrition with Chronometer, the podcast where we explore the science, stories, and strategies behind better health and nutrition. As always, I'm your host, Elisa Tennant, and I am the Community Marketing Manager at Chronometer. If you've ever dealt with bloating, digestive discomfort, food sensitivities, or the frustration of feeling like you're doing absolutely everything right, but still struggling with gut symptoms, today's episode is for you. And if you know me at all, you know today's episode is also definitely for me. Our guest today is Anna Mapson. She's a registered nutritional therapist specializing in IBS, SIBO, and digestive health. Through her clinical work, Anna has helped hundreds of people navigate the often confusing world of gut health, uncovering the root cause of their symptoms while rebuilding confidence around food. In this conversation, we're diving into some of the biggest misconceptions about gut health, the realities of restrictive diets, the role of fiber, probiotics, fermented food, and how nutrition tracking can help people better understand their symptoms without creating fear. We'll also discuss how to identify patterns, why triggers aren't always super obvious, and what a balanced approach to managing IBS can look like long-term. There is hope. Whether you're personally dealing with digestive issues or simply want to better understand the connection between nutrition and gut health, I think you'll find a lot of valuable takeaways in this episode. Before we begin, please remember that this podcast is for educational purposes only and should not be considered medical advice. Always consult with your physician or qualified healthcare provider before making changes to your diet, supplements, or healthcare routine. Okay, let's get into this one. Yeah, really excited to have you here, Anna. If you could tell me a little bit about yourself and how you even got into this line of work, because this feels very nuanced. So tell me all the things.
Yeah, hello. Well, great to be here. Thanks so much for having me. So I'm a registered nutritional therapist and I'm based in the UK in Bristol, and I work with people who have IBS, and that can be ranging from constipation, barely going to the toilet, to multiple times a day, like 7 or 8 times a day, very loose, and everything in between. And then a lot of symptoms like bloating, gas, reflux, those kind of digestive issues. A lot of the people I work with as well have real trouble with diets and not knowing what to eat, and like quite a restrictive diet because everything they're eating is causing more digestive chaos. So they tend to be eating quite small variety of foods by the time we start working together. So everyone comes from all over the world. Yeah. And I have quite broad different types of clients. But yeah, that's me really. Oh, you asked, how do I get into this? Well, I've been doing it for 10 years, and I just kind of on a whim decided to retrain. I previous to that worked in like financial services and in office, like working in insurance companies as a management consultant. And I decided to retrain after an illness I had for around a year, which was called a molar pregnancy. I don't know if you've ever heard of it. It's kind of very rare. So it's like the placenta of the pregnancy turns into a tumor and grows and grows. And so I had to have chemotherapy and take loads of time off work, and just sort of visited what I want to do with my life during that time.
I hadn't heard of that, but that I read that in your book, and I was very fascinated. And that has sparked your very cool haircut.
Yes, that's right. Yes, because all my hair fell out, and then as I grew back, people were like, "Hey, it looks really good short. You should keep it short." So
it does look really good short. I love it. I feel like everybody feels like they might have IBS, and maybe that's like quite a statement to say, but I don't know too many people that haven't had something going on with their guts at some point. I think we're starting to understand a little bit more, but I think it's largely misunderstood. Do you think that IBS affects as many people as we think it does, or can gut health just have moments of chaos for people?
Yeah, it's hard to judge the exact numbers of people who have it, but roughly 1 in 10 people will have it at some point in their life, mostly diagnosed like in your sort of early 20s, maybe 30s. But obviously, some people will have it diagnosed earlier, but really that's quite common, like around that sort of age. But it's hard to diagnose because like some people won't go to the doctor about it. It might just be a low-lying, uncomfortable digestion, struggling to go to the toilet or something. So they may not progress to the stage where they actually ask for help, but feel like they have, a bit of IBS is what people might say, I think. Yeah. So it kind of maybe comes and goes as well throughout people's lives. And that's also quite normal, that times of stress or it's like something big life change happens that can upset things, or maybe dietary changes. So it's, for some people it's constant and it gets worse and worse and they feel bad all the time. Other people, can have a few years off where they kind of feel okay and things seem to be working out. So I think it is pretty common. And because people don't like to talk about it very much because it involves toilet and, there's a kind of layer of shame about talking about poo and things like that. We don't necessarily share it with all our friends or with, neighbors, but they might also be in the same position.
One thing I've learned through managing our community here for 8 years is that people love talking about poop in our community. I think it's really funny that it's like a very taboo subject. And I often find it pretty hilarious that I'm like discussing these things on our podcast, but not something I'll discuss like with an average person or like a friend, because there is some kind of uncomfortability, I think, about talking about your poop. Yeah. But I'm honestly,
I spent all my days like asking people about, does it smell? What does it look like? And these kind of questions that mostly in real life, polite society, we don't talk like that.
I feel like the advice online about IBS is so confusing. What do you think is the biggest misconception that's out there right now about people eating for good gut health or for IBS?
I think the part of the problem is for IBS is that even if you have a doctor diagnose you with irritable bowel syndrome, there's no clear treatment process or no one diet that is going to suit everybody who has IBS, which means that people read something on the internet and they think, but that makes me worse. Like you're saying I should, eat more fiber. I feel worse when I eat fiber. Or you're saying I should do exercise, but I feel worse when I run. Or, because some people that will be true for them. And that's why it feels like it's a lot of misinformation. Sometimes it's just the wrong information for you. And that's where you need probably to work with someone who understands it and can sort of vary the questions. But I think generally like gut health, but, going a bit wider, thinking what about general gut health advice? I read this interesting post today and it was almost like saying there's a kind of gut health has gone too far towards gut health, like we're so obsessed with it. And it is an interesting area of research. It is, there could be some really interesting science coming out of it, but there may be too much focus on optimizing all these microbes and actually like taking us a little step back and going back to some of the basic health advice is kind of what we all need to do, sleeping, drinking water, eating our vegetables. So I think it's, it's an interesting time. Like there's maybe too much information for people to work out what's real and what's not.
Did you agree with the post? Do you think we need to get back to basics?
I think for most people, yes. There is an element of people trying to over-optimize their health. For example, wearing glucose monitors in the arm, even though you don't have diabetes, and trying to optimize your blood sugars when you're not even in that pre-diabetic range. Or like tracking your sleep and sort of with a Fitbit and really trying to optimize your sleep. Like I feel like we can maybe outsource too much to different algorithms and forget to tune inward and think about like, what is my body feeling? How am I actually feeling on the inside? So I guess, it's It's tricky because there's a lot of information around that's helpful and free. And so you want to maximize, what you can. I guess the change in AI as well is making it easier for people to feel like they're getting personalized information, whereas it's actually not personalized in the same way that a person could help tailor specific information to you.
For someone who suspects they have IBS, what are the steps that they would take to actually confirm a diagnosis?
So the way we would look at IBS diagnosis is to think about bowel movements. So are you going maybe just once or twice a week, or are you going multiple times a day? And is there pain associated with that? And really the key is, has it changed? Is it different to what's normal for you? And then if you have that sort of pattern and you think, yes, I feel like things are really different now, it's the first step would be to go and speak to your GP or, your primary doctor to say, I think something's going on. I don't know what's happening, or can you do some investigations? And then your doctor will decide whether they need to run some tests, maybe a blood test to look for inflammation, maybe a stool test to look for any infection or parasites or something, so that you can get specific. If you've been traveling, for example, like to somewhere where the water was maybe a bit dirty and now you've got diarrhea that won't go away, they may check for infections or parasites, something like that. But also looking for like blood in the stool, they will do a number of tests to check that there's nothing more serious going on. And then they might say, yeah, you've got IBS, when they've ruled a number of things out.
And then what happens?
Yeah.
And then they come see you?
Then what happens is often then the doctors say, okay, well, here is the low FODMAP diet. Off you go, try this. Or, you just need to eat healthier. So because most doctors don't actually have any nutrition training, or they have like half a day as part of their 7 years, that they're not best placed to advise on it, but that's sort of all some people can get access to. So the FODMAP diet that I mentioned there is a specific diet for people with IBS. And it's an acronym that's really long words. It stands for fermentable oligosaccharides, monosaccharides, disaccharides, and polyols. But because that's such a mouthful, we just say FODMAPs. And they are in healthy foods that are really good for us, but they're just very rapidly fermented by our gut bacteria and can add to bloating, gas, rapid gut transit time, that sort of thing. So for some people, it helps to take those foods out of the diet for a bit and then reintroduce them. And that's a potential route if you know when you're first diagnosed. But I think even before you get into that kind of stage, I might suggest thinking about what I kind of call your like foundations or basics. So there's lots of things that can influence our digestion. For example, stress is really overlooked a lot of the time. So when you're feeling very panicky, on the go all the time, anxiety, that can drive like higher levels of gut sensitivity. So it can make you react to foods that normally you wouldn't react to. So that would be one thing, is trying to think about, are you running on empty? Are you completely exhausted? Sleep is the other one. Like, are you actually allowing yourself time to sleep? Do you have high levels of alcohol or caffeine in your diet that you could kind of clear up and reduce? Because actually that does tend to cause similar issues to IBS, like people who are drinking a glass of wine every night with dinner, maybe a little bit more at the weekends. It can easily upset your gut and microbes and the digestive processes. So yeah, there's kind of those would be some of the key initial steps, is just to think about the basics. Like, are you sort of looking after your body? Are you doing any exercise? Do you ever do any movement? Because these sort of things really do impact on our digestion as well, and can be free to do before you sort of launch into taking any expensive supplements or overhauling your diet or anything like that.
I have an off-the-cuff question, but so I had alcohol this past weekend for the first time in 3 years. So it's been a minute. And before I had that, I had a vial which was given to me. It was like a prebiotic drink that you drink before you drink alcohol, which is supposed to mitigate some of the symptoms of a hangover. Apparently.
Did it work?
Tried it. Well, I've never had a hangover before. Like, I don't drink often enough I don't know if my body was like, she didn't mean it, it's fine. But I felt fine the next day, 100% actually. Went for like a 2.5 hour bike ride. But then the following day, it was rough, Anna. My guts were so upset. So I wonder if alcohol had, or potentially this prebiotic drink had an effect on.
But it could have been the prebiotic that caused that really in a way, because that is feeding the gut bacteria and like a highly fermentable dose of fiber that you're not used to in one go. Maybe that was the thing that caused it. Yeah.
It was not fun. I was out doing an activity, and then all of a sudden I had to go to the bathroom instantly, and I was like, this is so bad. So I wondered if you had, in your practice, like seen anything that was like that and had any indication if that is actually helpful, or if I just slammed like a prebiotic drink for no reason.
The prebiotics are not bad. They can be really good because they do feed the good bacteria. But sometimes if you're not used to it, or you do have bacteria there that are going to create a lot of gas, for example, then you can certainly get some negative consequences. So you sometimes see like inulin as an ingredient that is often from chicory, or these are like added to things like granola as sweeteners because they're non-sugary, but they're sweet and they're high in fiber. So they're great, but they are very rapidly fermentable. And sometimes they're added to supplements, like gut health supplements. So people take them feeling like, this is going to fix me, this is going to feel good. But then it makes things worse, depending on your digestion, your gut bacteria. So it can definitely happen with taking additional supplements. But I've not come across anything like that around the hangover prevention. I've seen like little sachets where they're like more like B vitamins and vitamin C and things like that to kind of help you the next day.
Okay, well, keep your eye out for them, and then maybe you'll have to report back as more research comes out, because I'm like, I don't know if this is gonna do anything, but potentially the placebo effect might as well. So backtracking just quickly, how long do you think somebody should live in these symptoms that could potentially be IBS or SIBO before they start intervening? Like, is it okay to have like a month of gut disruption and that's not IBS? Like, when should I intervene as someone who's not feeling well?
Yeah, I think it depends a bit on the severity of it. But if it's a sudden change, like probably after a few weeks, when it's been constant, like if you can only go to the bathroom once a week, or if you're suddenly, passing very liquid stools and it just doesn't go for 3 weeks, like I would go to the doctor after weeks, not months. But normally we're looking at like, how long has it been going on? Often it's around a couple of months by the time people get around to doing something about it. So if it is something that's worse, not IBS, then the quicker you can get some help with it, the better, really. So I guess it depends how much it's interfering with your life. Is it stopping you going out? Is it changing your eating habits? Maybe stopping you doing work events, that kind of thing? Then it's more serious than if it's just like a little niggle and you've not been feeling great. So probably the worse it is, the sooner you should go.
I think that gut health is really interesting because it varies so much person to person, and what we're willing to like live with changes person to person as well. Like, just on a personal antidote, I've actually had to do a lot of testing. And when I say testing, I don't mean I've gone and like had physical tests administered, but more playing around with my nutrition to discover my own intolerance to food. And I would love to hear some of your thoughts on this as I tell you a little bit about it. But basically, I used to go to a family dinner every Sunday for years. And I would leave there sick all the time. And by sick, I mean I looked pregnant. I would be so bloated and my abdomen would be so distended. It would be painful. It got to the point that when I was going, that I would have to like wear like a hoodie or something just to like cover how swollen I was. And then this was, now I've learned, obviously, like holding in farts essentially caused this. You can't fart at the dinner table. And then so, but I was just like, I'm just going to live with this. This is just like what it is. And I didn't have at the time the knowledge, because I was like a teenager. I didn't have the knowledge to be reflective and be like, this is only happening at family dinners. Like, what am I doing differently? That kind of thing. And it kind of ruled my life for a really long time. I would not typically have issues necessarily with like pooping, because that was fairly regular, but just with like really intense bloating pain when that happens from not like alleviating gas. And so at some point I was like, enough is enough. I don't know. I probably lived like that for 10 years. And then at some point I was like, enough is enough. I'm going to try to dial in what could be causing an issue. And that's when I was like researching online and found FODMAP. So that was helpful. And then looked at the foods that were potentially known to contribute to gastro issues, and then slowly eliminated and then reintroduced. And I actually used Chronometer for this. It was not the easiest process. I think we've evolved a lot since then as an app, but basically what I was doing is I tracked my nutrition every day anyway. And then I created a metric for like gastro upset. And then I would chart it later. And I was able to identify that garlic, which is so sad, garlic and I do not get along at all. And since then, this is where I'm like really excited to sit down with you and hear your thoughts, because I'm sure I'm not alone. But since then, it has really changed my eating habits, because garlic isn't everything. And when I'm dining out or like going to a friend's house or something, I've tended for the last now like 10 years to mostly have like sweeter foods when I'm like, if there's an option, I'm like French toast, for example, or like pancakes, because I know that those things typically are not cooked with garlic. And so I've shifted, those were unconscious, but shifted entirely the way that I've eaten to try to avoid potentially having this pain, because I've never encountered anything that's like worth living with the pain for the taste. And the reason why I think that was happening at these Italian dinners is because Italians love garlic. I was having like 3 pieces of garlic bread and then just feeling so sick. So I'm curious, as someone who sees this, like you talked about, like potentially like reintroducing foods. Is that something that I could explore in the future? Can I have garlic at some point ever again? Or do you think that like some people just have to live with these sensitivities?
Some people do have struggle to digest certain foods, for sure. And it won't change. It's like a genetic thing. You don't make the enzyme that breaks it down. Like typically lactose, for example, people will really struggle not breaking down lactose, often dependent on their like genetic heritage. Some people just don't have it in their gut to make it. So then when you eat any dairy, it causes bloating and gas and diarrhea. But for some of the other types of food intolerance, like that can be influencing IBS, it can be related to the bacteria in the gut, because they also start to process the food. So when you eat something, it goes in your stomach, the like stomach acid gets to work on it, breaks down the proteins, And then in the small intestine, there's more digestive enzymes that come in and start breaking up the food. Now, if you don't have one of these enzymes that start to break the food down so it can be absorbed, it will travel in a bigger molecule to the large intestine. And that's where your gut bacteria really start to get to work on it. So sometimes it's about not having the enzyme, or sometimes it's about what type of bacteria you have in the large intestine that are there. I've found people can start to train their gut up in a lot of cases, though. If you can't eat it now, it doesn't mean you never will. So I would try reintroducing, because also intolerance can definitely change. Yeah, people will change it over time.
Why do you think that these issues are so different from person to person? Just because different people don't have those enzymes? And if they don't have them, like, why? What am I lacking that other people have?
Well, for good digestion, we need all of those bits to be working in sync, really. You need the stomach acid to be produced. If you're eating on the go, standing up, eating really fast, not chewing your food very well, that stomach acid doesn't get produced because it's like your body hasn't caught up with your brain. And so things like sitting down to eat your dinner are really helpful, or the main meals, like trying to slow down, chew your food well, because then it gives your body a time to create the juices that it needs to break the food down. And that helps you to digest better. So sometimes we need all of these things to be working in the right process at the right time. So yeah, stomach acid. Bile is another one that's released to emulsify our fats. Now, this can be sluggish and slow due to hormonal changes. So estrogen has like a big effect on bile. Even sometimes like dehydration can affect the production of some of these digestive juices. And definitely stress because of the blood flow to the gut. And when we're like running in fight or flight mode and feeling kind of stressed all the time, then we don't always produce or get the same amount of blood flowing to the gut, which helps with the motility. So that's, how we can influence it ourselves a little bit in some ways, but then also everyone has their own genetics, like things run in families. Sometimes there is a genetic element to digestive conditions being passed down, but also our gut microbes are completely individual. Even if you are an identical twin, you will probably have different digestion, different microbes, and that can influence what food you can tolerate. So yeah, there's so many reasons why one person can and another person can't. But I do think, I would say there's hope that maybe you can bring back garlic at some point.
I really hope so. But it's interesting, and you probably see it a lot. I love some thoughts here too. It created fear around social situations, and still honestly sometimes does. And then when I tell people that I can't have garlic because I just don't ever want to feel that way again. It's so bad. And honestly, it's just not. And for me, it's bad in the moment, but it's bad for like weeks after. Like, it's not just like a couple days, I stay like quite swollen for a while. But I have like some safe foods, like sushi tends to be good, but it has really ruled my life a little bit. Do you see issues like this having the same effect on your clients?
Definitely. Yes. This is a really big part of what I do working with people, because your brain's trying to keep you safe. It makes complete sense. You had a horrible experience. You don't want to go back there. You'd do anything to stop having that. But in a way, the more you avoid it, and, whether it is, for some people, it's eating the food. For other people, it's like going on a train, or maybe making a presentation at work or something. Whatever the thing is that you fear, the more that you avoid it, you don't give your brain any chance to see a positive outcome. You only think of the bad outcome that's happened and what could go wrong. And it kind of gets more power mentally. So it's a challenge with IBS because, yes, foods do influence it. Food's like the main cause of that in some ways. It's like when you eat, you get the pain. So, of course, it makes sense to want to not eat the thing again. But honestly, like digestion can really change. And like you said, over 10 years, you've probably learned so much and changed your whole physiology from all the things you've been doing, all the people you've been speaking to, and, really learning a lot about ways to help optimize your health. And so probably your whole body's in a different state as it was since you last had garlic. You might be you might be more resilient now than you think, or than you were before. But also, yeah, I mean, maybe it will be, but the way to test it out would be to start with a really small amount. And for some people, when I help them with introducing foods, we're just trying literally one blueberry or one slice of courgette or zucchini, because they haven't had any vegetables for so long and they're so worried about fiber that it's just a very small amount that we're trying. And so even with garlic, you could try a really small amount just to have it in your mouth, or even just to have it near on the plate, just to kind of get used to being near it again, because that fear is very real. Yeah, I do see that quite a bit.
Yeah, I loved some of the case studies that you wrote about in your book, because I felt very seen, I guess. People who don't have any issues, they're very lucky, but they might not understand what it's like to be in pain from eating, or, not many of my friends, because this has been an ongoing issue for me now, but I do get chirped a little bit about getting chicken fingers and fries sometimes when we go out to a pub, and I'm like, this is self-preservation. I also love chicken fingers and fries, but I'm like, this is largely self-preservation because I don't want to put myself in a situation with AOEs or that kind of thing. But people who don't have problems just don't even know what it feels like to worry. And then I get in my head too, and especially after reading your book about how closely linked stress and gut health is, I'm like, maybe I'm making this worse on myself by worrying if I'm accidentally going to have garlic, and maybe it's just this vicious cycle that I'm stuck in. So potentially your suggestion for trying a little bit intentionally would go over very well.
And just think about what's the smallest amount that you could think you would be able to tolerate. It could just be a tiny, tiny cube. Putting that in one of your meals, adding it in, probably cook for anything you want to try for the first time. Cooked is easier than raw to digest, but making sure that you do some of those, deep breathing before you try and get yourself into a calm state, because it can make things worse. And actually the stress of thinking about it can cause the symptoms that you're worried about in the first place. So
it's a vicious cycle.
Yeah.
Do you think that people who have IBS or SIBO are more likely to be deficient in any particular nutrients as a result of this fear of eating?
Yeah, so some nutrients, there's been various studies that show certain nutrients are low in people who have IBS, in the diet of people who have IBS, because of the restrictions. And this is often zinc, maybe calcium if they don't have any dairy, some B vitamins, maybe B12, iron can be for some people. And then for other people, they've tested their actual serum, the blood, what is not just what you're eating and whether it's got enough of those nutrients, but actually how's your body doing. And some of those same nutrients can be low due to restrictions. Yeah. So it depends on what you eat and what you're missing. For most people who just avoid one or two foods, they're probably going to be completely fine and not have any deficiencies or insufficiencies. But where people are on very restricted diet, eating the same 8 foods every day, day in, day out, there's more chance for it to cause problems. Yeah. So this is where then sometimes the nutrient deficiency itself can then cause further problems, and that is a real challenge. So thinking about iron, for example, it can make you very tired, lack of energy, you don't want to exercise, that can affect your motility. Same with B12, it really affects the gut motility, but also just, how energetic you're feeling. So zinc is really important for the lining of the stomach. because, all of the nutrients are important, and you can't really just take a multivitamin and hope that it's all going to be like just supplemented, because a lot of the nutrients are kind of built into the food matrix. We get the antioxidants, we get the fiber, and all of those things that they're bound together. They're not just a single nutrient that we can supplement. Yeah, but if people are on a very restricted diet, a multi-nutrient is probably a good idea, just to cover a few bases until you get your diet back to where you need to be. Yeah.
Do you recommend then people are tracking their diets to make sure that they have adequate nutrition? Or
yeah. Some people, it can be really helpful. I mean, I've had a few people recently, and they have found they're overeating on fiber because they're so keen to hit their like 30 grams of fiber a day, or their 30 different foods a week. They hear about all these metrics online, and they really want to have the healthiest gut because they don't feel good, and they've kind of fixated on these targets. And actually we found like they're eating over 30 grams, and reducing it down, being simple, could actually help. So yes, I do help people with tracking, and I think it can be very helpful, particularly around protein. I think people think, oh, like I'm doing all right. I eat meat. I have chicken, once a day. I kind of have, but then they realize when we look at it, oh yeah, you don't have any protein at breakfast, and you only have like a bit of cheese in your sandwich at lunch, or maybe one egg or something. So actually when we stack it up, they're not really eating enough. So can be very helpful at the beginning to think about, just your overall macros, and look, do you have any foods that have got calcium in them if you don't eat dairy, for example, like really pinpointing those things that might be missing. So yeah, tracking can be helpful, but I also work with people who can over track and fixate on it too much.
I wonder if I'm one of those people. Actually, I love tracking my nutrition. So I'm maybe on the nerdier
What would
side
happen
of
if we had a few weeks off? Like, can you imagine stopping the tracking for a bit to pause it?
No, I can't. That's a good question. I can't for a few reasons. One, I think that in my role at Chronometer, as our community manager, I manage our online community. It's like it would feel very disingenuous, I think, for me to recommend people track when I'm not doing it myself. But for me, I don't think it's like I have moments of tracking with like great flexibility still. Like I'm not like, I oftentimes will weigh my food, but then I'll go through periods of being just a little bit less on the ball with that. We have a feature now, photo logging, which is pretty good, but not as accurate, obviously, as like weighing food. And sometimes like that will be enough for me. And lately I have had less of a drive to track accurately. But that's coming from my run volume decreased. And so for me, the reason I track is I'm a runner that runs like variable distances day to day. And I was actually under eating significantly because I was always eating like 1,800 calories every day. And then some days I walk the dog, go for a bike ride, and then go for like a 10K run. And then like two days later, I'm like, why am I fatigued? And then tracking actually, like, because I've maintained my weight, I'm not motivated by a weight goal. I haven't been for a number of years. I'm just way more well fed, I would say. So I'm actually eating significantly more as a result of tracking, which might not be everyone's story. So I feel like I have a healthy relationship with it. But one of the things I love about my job is I completely appreciate how it's not for everybody all the time. And, like I checked in on my mom's diet for her a few times. Yeah. I'm definitely someone that's like, whatever works for you works best. So
yes, I definitely see it as a good tool in the toolbox. I have a client who is finding it very hard to stop tracking everything. So for some people, it can be really challenging. And I think, a good question I often ask is, how is this working for you? Is it working? And what are the benefits of it for you? And could there be any drawbacks? And, for any kind of big change where people are finding it difficult, it's just to think, right, how is it going right now with what you're doing? Mm-hmm. Because sometimes, I wouldn't say obsession, but like an over-analysis on the details. I think it is really great, like you said, for checking overall energy, protein, like looking at the macros, those kind of things, to get an insight into your diet. An average person doesn't necessarily need to track everything all the time, I don't think.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's totally fair. I completely see that side of things. For me, I had a very disordered eating history in high school where I was very restrictive. So for me, it's really freeing, which I think when I say that to people, they're like, that's unusual that tracking something so closely could be freeing. But I was eating 800 calories a day, and now I eat like 25. So if you had told teenage Elisa that I'd be eating 3 times as much, I would have never, and maintaining my weight, I would have never believed myself. But I think that, it's been good for me. But like I said, totally appreciate it. It's not always great for everybody. It's as individual as diets are, right?
Definitely. Yes. I'm glad it's working out for you. Do you feel like it then allows you to eat more because you know how much is in each food? Like you understand the nutritional content of most foods now. I mean, that's often what I say to people. If you've done some on tracking, you kind of know what you need to be eating because you've done it for so long, right? You know how much protein is in this much chicken and how much fiber is in all of these different vegetables, because it's such a good, thorough tool that you actually know all of those things because you just get familiar with them over time.
Yeah, I think that being able to understand what's in your food goes a long way. And I don't really know if people always have any kind of indication. Like just our staff, for example, I thought this was really fun. I had a weigh scale and nuts beside the weigh scale.
Oh, yeah.
And I'm like, tell me how many nuts are 100 calories. And the difference in people's answers, even though we work for a nutrition tracking app, was astonishing. Some people were putting 6 nuts. Some people were 2 handfuls. And I'm like, this is a perfect example as to why just weighing your food, tracking your food gives you some kind of ability to discern what's going to be good for you and your health beyond calorie tracking, but protein, fiber, that kind of thing. So Very interesting. Have you seen any of your clients discover anything interesting? Or is there something across the board you're learning if people are tracking for a little while with IBS?
What I find common things are protein that I mentioned is not sufficient. Most people I work with tend to be under eating rather than overeating because of the fear of food, the restriction to trigger food so that they're cutting more and more out. So more of it is about helping people expand their diet. So thinking about, tracking under eating, maybe not enough protein. And then sometimes the surprising thing is, like I said, too much fiber because they're actually eating or maybe too much of the wrong fibers as well. And I don't mean wrong fibers, but they could just be eating a lot of wheat. So the overall fiber content could be quite high, but it's mostly maybe the insoluble fibers in whole grains. And it's very healthy, very good for us to eat grains. But when that's your main source of fiber and there's none of the other things in there, then it maybe is influencing your gut symptoms. So that's one of the things. I guess we've talked a bit about FODMAPs, but people tend to be very frightened of reintroducing higher FODMAP foods. So especially for people who have SIBO. I know we've mentioned it a few times. Do you think shall I say a bit about what it is?
Yeah, please do. I read your book, so I feel well versed now, but most of our community might not be.
Yeah, that's right. So it stands for small intestine bacterial overgrowth, and it's just too many microbes in the upper part of your digestive tract, and they create a lot of bloating and gas because they're fermenting foods that you eat, mostly carbohydrates. So people with SIBO tend to avoid all sugars, cut out all fruit, maybe don't eat any grains, because these are the foods that typically send their symptoms wild. So those foods tend to be the most feared. And what I find, people then are very scared to reintroduce them because they may get the symptoms, but the fear at the back of the mind is that you're really feeding the microbes and making things worse. And when we don't really have very much evidence about diets in SIBO, so it might help the symptoms in the short term, but if you do have this infection, like, the way to treat it is through either antibiotics, or there's various sort of herbal supplements that you can take which kill off the microbes, but that's the treatment. It's not the diet's not the treatment. And so people could be dealing with this for years. And if you're never going to eat any carbs or sugar or fruit or anything, then that has a knock-on impact on the rest of your health. And like we were saying, it can lead to nutrient insufficiencies, deficiencies, which then impact on your digestive processes. So I try to get people eating a broader diet as possible, rather than trying to manage the symptoms by eating less and less.
I like that outlook a lot better. That sounds a lot more well balanced. Yeah. What's your take on pro and prebiotics?
Yeah, so probiotics are like the live bacteria that you can take. It can be very, very helpful for some people, particularly if your diet is so restricted, or you've had multiple rounds of antibiotics over the years, perhaps recurrent UTIs or other tonsillitis, other infections where you've had to take a lot of antibiotics. That kills off a lot of bacteria in our gut. And so by repopulating it, well, we ideally want to do that through food. So the probiotics that you take, they don't stay in you forever. You take them, they kind of don't colonize your gut, but they can change the environment whilst they're there, maybe 2 weeks. And then when you stop taking them, they kind of pass out through in the poo. That's a big bulk of the poo is actually dead bacteria. So yes, probiotics, I think, have a place. There's lots of different types. There's single strain probiotics, and these tend to be the ones where we've had research about them. So particular strains for constipation, or particular strains for gut sensitivity, like bloating and so on. And taking them for one problem won't necessarily help with another problem. And that's where it can get a little bit confusing. People say, oh, I tried probiotics and it didn't work. But maybe you took the strain that wasn't really designed or researched for the problem that you have. So it can be confusing.
Can everybody benefit from taking them, even if they're not having stomach issues? Or do you think if you're feeling 100 that it's kind of a moot point?
Yeah, I don't think there's necessarily purpose for everybody taking them. And actually, for some people, it does make things worse or cause problems because you're adding additional live bacteria. It's even if you've had a stool test and had a good check of your microbiome of what microbes are in there, you don't necessarily know all the microbes, because all you can test is what came out in the stool, what was in the poo. And that's only a proportion of bacteria in your large intestine. Plus, you have the bacteria in your small intestine, the ones that are in the mucus lining of the gut. They don't come out every day. So we don't even know all the microbes that are there. And you put live ones in, they can sometimes wreck the party. They can mess things up. Sometimes they make things a lot better because they're adding missing colonies. So it very much depends on whether you need them or not. And you don't necessarily know that. But there's, different types. So for example, the bifidobacterium strains tend to be very good for constipation. And they're sort of single strain ones, whereas people who take sometimes the lactobacillus, so those are the two main probiotics that you get in a lot of products. The lactobacillus ones, sometimes people find that increases methane producing microbes, and then that can cause more gas. So over time, people who have SIBO, some of them have been taking probiotics in the run up to getting SIBO. And I guess we don't know what caused it or whether they were taking them because they had digestive issues. But there has been this sort of association in some studies showing that, sometimes the added extra microbes are unneeded and not doing the right job.
That's helpful. What about fermented foods? Sorry, I'm asking all the buzzy questions. These are all the
Yeah,
things I've
that's
wanted
okay.
to know.
Fermented foods, yes, some of them contain live probiotics, like live bacteria. So things like yogurt, sauerkraut, kimchi, these are all helpful for a lot of people. They if you want them for the good bacteria to be alive, then they need to be like non-pasteurized. Things like sauerkraut, they have live bacteria on the packet. Yeah, they can be helpful again for some people, but I wouldn't like think they're essential. So one food's not going to completely make or break your diet. And if you like them, certainly to include them, adds a bit of variety, can be very helpful. So yogurt's a great food, lots of health properties. Yeah, I mean, I would say they're helpful foods, but not essential. So if you don't like them or you don't get on with them, it doesn't mean that you're not healthy.
I like ginger, like fermented ginger.
Oh, nice. That sounds good.
Yeah, that's
I
my
love
favorite.
ginger. Yeah.
Yes, also good for the gut, or so I've been told. I mean,
Yes.
I'm
Yeah.
hoping.
It's good for nausea, gut motility. Yeah, ginger can be very helpful.
I love that. Couple questions about social media, which you touched on a little bit earlier, but I'd love to just dive in a little bit more. Do you think that social media is making gut health more or less confusing for consumers?
Probably more confusing, I think, to the average person. Yeah, because there's just so much information out there, and people are saying, oh, gluten's toxic, dairy's inflammatory, seed oils are bad for you. All of these things that actually aren't necessarily true, and makes people more afraid. And you feel like, oh, I can't do anything right, because there's whatever you look at, there's something that's bad about it. Even oily fish, or maybe it's got mercury in it, or it's not sustainable. There's so many things we can just like really send ourselves mad thinking about trying to get it right and trying to perfect it. So I think it makes it more confusing. But, on the other hand, it is helpful for people to feel like they're not alone, especially as we talked like with IBS, it can be challenging to feel like actually you don't have anyone to talk to about it. So knowing that there are other people out there that have similar issues to you can be really reassuring.
I think that's one of the toughest things about social media. Even, I've dove deep into like PubMed articles and stuff, even just about like protein intake recently. And I was like, there's something here that I could make any argument for, like high protein, low protein diet. And I'm like, if I'm having a hard time discerning this, like how do our users who may be less well versed in nutrition, right? So, and I think gut health is one of those things because it really is getting a moment. And I love that as somebody that has a sensitive gut. But then I'm like, again, how are people discerning what's actually plaguing them because it's so individualized? So obviously we're
A lot of the research as well is not really conclusive in terms of clinical changes that you would do. It says, taking this or eating this made someone's gut microbes change, but we don't necessarily know, is that good? Is that bad? Does it cause symptoms? Does it improve them? We just see, yes, it changes these microbes, but we don't necessarily translate it into real life. And so there's so much research, like gut health research has just gone over the last 20 years, really incredibly massive load of different researchers and topics, but I don't think it translates very well into actionable things that we need to do.
No, I wholeheartedly agree with that. I think that that's kind of what I'm seeing. And then I do get sometimes a little bit worried, and I'd love to hear your take on this, from all these cleanses and that kind of thing. Do you think that there is like, I mean, for me, early on, like cleanses were like just coming out, and a lot of the time, like to do an elimination diet, like with the intention of reintroducing a food later, you kind of like want to get back to like baseline with your stomach, right? So a lot of these people are doing like cleanses, and I've even seen, which you talked about in your book, like coffee enemas and that kind of thing. Like, do you have any thoughts on any trends that you've seen that are actually potentially like dangerous or worse? Do you think that there's value in doing these like gut cleanses? I would love to hear your thoughts as an expert.
Yeah, I think they can be really dangerous. So coffee enema is, for anyone who doesn't know, is basically putting coffee up your bum. And there has been cases where people have scalded themselves and burnt their colon or rectum through putting too hot liquids up there. The same with colonic irrigation, that's flushing water up your bum. And sometimes that can even perforate or change the bowel. So it can be very dangerous to put things up inside us where they're not supposed to be. Also, I think it kind of comes from the bad feeling, right? So the feeling for wanting to cleanse, wanting to be fresh, like start again. It often comes from this wanting to be right again and wanting to be pure and kind of clean from the inside. And I think that's a kind of difficult place to be, especially because IBS is often around poo and it can, feel dirty. We don't like talking about it. And then the thought of having everything washed out and being clean from the inside is very appealing to people. So I can definitely see where that drive comes from for people to want to try this. And the marketing for it all is very clever. It's all about feeling fresh and energized and starting again. So it looks really appealing, but often they are just starvation diets. So people will be eating very little, like just juice cleanses or, only eating rice and a few vegetables for 3 days. And the supplements that people are supposed to take alongside many of these cleanses, aren't sort of regulated, or they may be including things that aren't really necessary. I think having no food or not very much food for 3 days can impact on your gut motility. So definitely can be dangerous at the worst. At the best, probably useless, I would say. So I don't recommend them. And I would say, either nothing's going to happen or could be some damage. So by cutting out foods, you kind of get a little bit more obsessed with foods, I would say, as well. And maybe, you have some thoughts on that, but the more restricted, the more difficult it is to think normally about eating. You become obsessed with it, more rigid thoughts. You tend to be like black and white. It's all or nothing. That's really common. So unfortunately, it's difficult to break out of that mindset.
Yeah, I agree. I actually, earlier this year, maybe the end of last year, time is a blur, but interviewed a dietitian that I had on the podcast before, and he did some self experimentation and he did the carnivore diet and versus like the whole foods diet, because basically someone in his audience like called him out about it, and at the end of it, should check back in with him. At the end of it, because he was so restrictive, he was actually really finding it challenging to find balance again. And this is someone that's a professional that, knows the warning signs. And I felt really deeply impacted actually by that, because I felt the same way. Like I know what it feels like to have fear of food and eating too much or not enough or being worried about symptoms. And I just so many people are living like this. And if someone who has all these tools is feeling that, then I definitely think that a lot of other people might be. And I remember in high school, cleanses being I forget the name of the one. I think it's a master cleanse. It was lemon juice with water with maple syrup. And my friend group, despite all being very slender women, we were all doing these cleanses and stuff. And now in hindsight, I'm thinking, oh my gosh, we were 100 pounds starving ourselves for a week because we were told it was going to make us feel better. And I'm just all this information is still circulating out there. And as someone who's now more informed, I just have so much compassion for the people that are just trying to feel better and will grasp at anything. And I feel like it's a population that's a little bit vulnerable. And I feel like oftentimes they're being taken advantage of. So that's why it's really important, I think, to follow people that actually know what they're talking about, like you know, people like actually read, you know, books like that have knowledge from people that are experts. I think that's really important instead of not necessarily taking advice for something that could be damaging from an influencer.
And sometimes like it's not even the drive is to feel better, isn't even from a physical complaint. It can just be, you know, I feel a bit not myself, or I feel a bit sad or angry or something, you know, more emotional that is going on. And this thought of, again, like feeling more energized and cleansed is appealing for that reason. So it might not even be that people are coming to this for the first time with gut issues, but it certainly might cause them down the line if you carry on.
For sure. Yeah, that's a good point. I just have a couple more questions for you, Anna, if that's okay. What does a balanced and sustainable diet for someone with IBS look like long term? Any thoughts on that?
So long term, it's trying to get back to as broad a diet as you can tolerate. That might be starting off with very small changes and trying to reintroduce foods that feel more comfortable. So I wouldn't necessarily suggest people start off eating lentils and apples and onions and things that they haven't been eating for a long time, but certainly trying to get a little bit more variety within the low FODMAP diet, if that's what your restrictions are. Trying to eat foods, vegetables that maybe you haven't had for a while, or fruits. And fruit tends to be something that people avoid a lot. I think that's something else that people tend to undereat on, fruits. So I think, longer term, it's kind of a balance of proteins, fats, and carbs with as much fiber as you can tolerate, and trying to enjoy life as well, for it not to be perfect. For you can have a takeaway and a glass of wine when you want it, and to be able to have a bit of chocolate now and again, and just to enjoy eating, and rather than feeling that everything you eat is dangerous and is going to kick off those kind of symptoms that you're describing. So that's the long-term goal. The steps to get there can be very small and gradual.
At what point, when someone's feeling better, do you start reintroducing foods?
Well, sometimes we do start even if they don't feel better, because if people have been feeling bad for a while and they don't really know what's wrong, have had all the tests come back clear, like there's no medical reason why they should be having any of these problems, had a lot of things ruled out, then we can start to think, well, if you don't feel any better, whether you eat the foods or you don't eat them, then you may as well be eating them. So sometimes we need to just find a baseline, even if it's not feeling much better. But as long as you kind of have some sort of stability, then or ideally, yes, you try like something like the low FODMAP diet as an intervention. Do it for 6 weeks max, and then start to reintroduce the foods. So it depends on where your starting points are, but I would say just start with some variety or some of the safest foods if you're not feeling great. And the safest foods for you might be different to somebody else, but for sure it would probably be a low FODMAP vegetable or something like that.
My last question, I ask everybody this question. It's my favorite. If you could give our listeners one piece of health advice for them to take away today, what would it be? This is the one I always try to then like enact in my own life. So
yes. It's really tricky. I often struggle with what to pick, but I think for most people, it's just to try and eat a little bit more fiber. You know, most people are not hitting their 5 a day, or even the 10 a day target. That's the ultimate. But 5 fruit and vegetable portions a day is, I mean, I don't know about in the US, but in the UK, people are on about 3.5. That's average. So just adding 1 portion of fruit or vegetables to your day is a good place to start. And 1 portion is kind of around a handful to like 3 florets of broccoli, handful of carrots, 1 banana, 1 orange. That's 1 portion.
Okay, that's helpful. I love fruit, so that's easy for me.
Yeah. You're probably doing really well already. You already, I'm sure you have a very, very good diet through all the optimization. But for a lot of people out there, I think they need to just start with the basics rather than, worrying about particular strange antioxidants or something very niche. I would just say, are you eating enough fruit and vegetables? Begin there.
I think that's perfect. Baby steps. Anna, where can people find you? Give us a little bit of a synopsis of your book. I encourage people to. I actually got it on Kindle, so that was really cool. But I know you can get it from Amazon as well. Just help us connect our community with yours.
Thank you. Yes, my book is called Inside Knowledge for People Who Have IBS and SIBO, and it's available paperback or Kindle download from Amazon, anywhere in the world. And I'm also on social media as goodnessme_nutrition. So my podcast as well is same name, Inside Knowledge for People with IBS. That's on like Spotify, Apple, and everywhere you get YouTube, everywhere you get podcasts. Website as well, where you can find lots of blog posts, information. So I have like downloads. People can understand a little bit more. Like I have a little workbook about non-food changes to make for people with IBS. So that might be a good place to start if you're not quite sure what to do. You don't know if you need to change your diet or not. Start by looking at the non-food things and go from there.
Amazing. I will make sure that I link all of your social handles, your website, and link for the Amazon book purchase as well in the show notes. So if anybody's curious, they can find that's there. But it's been a pleasure to have you. I've really enjoyed this episode, and I think that our listeners, both users and listeners will too. So thanks for taking time out of your day to be here with us, especially because you are across the pond and it is later.
Yes, thank you so much. I've really enjoyed speaking to you. Yes, it's just gone 8:00 now, so
bedtime.
Yeah.
Awesome.
Thank you very much.
Thanks. Take care, Anna.
Thanks to Anna for joining us today and sharing your expertise. I really appreciated the practical, balanced approach to gut health and the reminder that nutrition doesn't have to be restrictive to be effective. If you'd like to learn more about Anna, her practice, her book, Inside Knowledge for People with IBS and SIBO, we'll make sure that we include the links in the show notes. Thank you, everyone, so much for listening. If you enjoyed this episode, be sure to subscribe to Discovering Nutrition with Chronometer so you'll never miss one of these conversations. I'd also love it if you left a rating or review, as it helps more people discover our show. As always, remember that nutrition is personal, and understanding your own habits, patterns, and needs is one of the most powerful steps you can take towards better health. I like to think I might be living proof of that. Thanks for listening, and I'll see you next time with another great episode.